Okay. Good Thinking 57. This is such a good one. I'm so excited. So many things get covered.
Yeah, we get into a lot. We get into Instagram Premium, which is not a new app, but a new way of thinking.
Yes, everything you need to know about that. We talk about unabashed ambition, which I'm here for and excited to see.
Yeah, big cultural trend. We talk about body deodorant and all the crazy things that are happening with repositioning of brands like Dove and Lynx.
Why Parker Posey is so iconic in this gap spot, really breaking that down and seeing the future there.
Yeah, and we also talk about in tech how ChatGPT prompts are becoming essentially a place to look for new business ideas and opportunities for your brand.
So enjoy and let us know in the comments what you think, what you disagree with, what you agree with.
Yeah, can't wait for you to enjoy it.
Good morning. Good afternoon.
Good morning.
Good Thinking 57.
Yeah. Welcome to Good Thinking, the podcast, the best of the best for brands, marketing, and culture.
If you're a CEO, CMO, investor, or creative, we help you stay ahead with the insights from retail, tech, food and beverage, wellness, sports, and more.
No silos, no fluff, just strategies shaping business today.
Be sure to subscribe on YouTube, especially if you want the video version, or your favorite podcast app, Spotify and Apple, and subscribe to Good Thinking on Substack for more.
All right, let's
Should we dig in?
Yes.
Okay, lots to dig into this week. As always, just mentioning kind of the upcoming travel, San Francisco, LA, New York, all the things happening.
I may even be squeezing in a Palm Springs visit for one of the Good Thinking readers. So, we're making it all happen.
I love it. Love it. Can't wait. All right, culture. Digging in first and foremost, we got to talk about Instagram Premium.
Yeah, I actually did a LinkedIn post on this today. So if you like that and you're into that, I compiled for you a nice little video of all of the 10 different brands that I think are doing this well, which is kind of fun. But yeah, so one of the things about LinkedIn Premium, so first of all, LinkedIn Premium is not a new app. Right? I think we should just say that first and foremost.
Not another thing you have to download.
It's like, oh my goodness, is this the new Reels app? Because they're talking about spinning Reels off. Is this no. It is what commenters are commenting on content that is going up that really kind of feels more like these mini movies that I've been sharing this content for ages, for basically the entire duration of Good Thinking, without really a solid way of talking about it, right? I was calling them social movies. I was talking about the movie trend. This feels like a great term I love it when so this term is widely being used. It wasn't created by Rachel Carton, but she kind of is popularizing it, I would say, in her letter about it. And I was like, I love when I have a term to describe something that I've been trying to describe, the shorthand of it. It's just so necessary. So, all the Mercedes content that I've been posting, all of the Saucony. Wow, that came out weird.
Saucony,
guys.
Saucony for the win.
Living in Europe has really changed the way I say things. I'm about to say Nike, guys. It's going to get bad. Yeah, just all this really high quality content that's really, really good. And I'm loving it. I'm happy that we're not past our UGC era, but I'm happy that we are in an era of we want to see stories and we'd like to see things that are visually exciting. I don't think that any of those things went away. We were just telling social teams and telling everyone that those things didn't perform. And now we're proving, I think Jacquemus was one of the early players in this space, always has done this really well. I think has proven that it's hey, actually people just really like to be entertained, and quality entertainment is not.
Right. It feels like it kind of a yes and, right? We can still have kind of the quicker the UGC, kind of that end of things, but kind of having a more elevated, as we've known and dug in with clients, is how do you create something that is social first, that is shot really in a modern way, in a quick way, kind of all of those parts and pieces, but still has that cinematic experience. It feels like finally we're doing that, but just giving kind of a name to it.
Exactly. So here for that.
All right, F&B. We got to dig into cockfights and kind of what's happening with all of these brands going at it.
Yeah, I don't know. The brands are fighting, guys. It's a vibe. So the one that I was talking about in the letter this week was in China. McDonald's has created this campaign about their cage-free chicken, and they're they've like plastered the acronym CFC. So instead of KFC, CFC, all over the posters and everything. Obviously, they're picking a fight, like a cockfight, making it like with KFC, and you know, implying lots of things about KFC's quality of chicken. But like, actually, I read in another article, and this is a really great Substack, by the way, if you're interested in the Asian market. Dow Insights is really, really good. I really enjoy reading them. And they actually had another article this week about how they're also fighting over coffee. Like, so the coffee chain sort of situation for both of these brands is really high stakes in China. And they're also having like fights over that. And the other examples that I was giving are, the Cadburys did that really fun campaign with the copywriting that we shared a few weeks ago. And then Tony Chocolonely, which my husband was like, is that a real name? I was like, you've seen the packaging. You just have to see the packaging and you know which brand it is.
100%.
But they did a take on that copywriting and put it up as an ad. And it was like, basically accusing Cadbury's of, not fair trade and like, exploitation of people through their chocolate. It was really like quite aggressive. And then Hatch had this really fun out-of-home campaign where they started to buy out-of-home ad space next to where Apple's out-of-home ad spaces were. And then they were putting billboards up that were like literally pointing at Apple's and saying like, don't do this. So, I think it's just interesting to see brands picking fights with one another. I think, back in the day, I think of all the like TV campaigns where it would be like, like Persil, like, detergent or whatever, or like Dawn. And it was like, 10 times better. And it would be like the silhouette of this very recognizable silhouette of another competitor. Like it feels kind of like that, except that it's more deliberate, like it's really like calling out these other brands. And, the political landscape right now would probably make me think that it's coming out of that. Like, that we are fighting in the comment sections as a culture. We're fighting, in every respect. I'm not sure I'm into it. Like, honestly, the negativity of it. It is fun. Like the Hatch one, I think is fun, right? Like it is fun.
Yeah.
It's less like calling somebody out for like terrible practices, which, I think probably needs to be done, but I'm just not sure it's the forum for it. But yeah, I was more into the Bobby, like the brands coming together to fight the fight against something else is so much more inspiring to me as a consumer. But yeah, don't know.
Right. Lifting each other up, which those brands did a great job doing, whereas this feels much more in your face. And it's interesting. It feels like it's just getting more and more aggressive. Like it's kind of started as a poke with other brands, with one brand to another brand. And now it is just getting much more kind of in your face. It's kind of taking the Pepsi, the cola wars to the next level.
I mean, Burger King, McDonald's, like they've always had kind of this like vibe of like Burger King has done this many times, typically in a more fun and tongue-in-cheek way. But yeah, it's an interesting vibe. I would love to see brands come together and fight against a common enemy. Versus just each other.
Not what we would need in the world right now.
Not for me, anyway.
Yeah, I feel you. Drugs and booze. Throwing in a watch, I think it's interesting to talk about, but I think even more so his unabashed ambition.
Yes, we should talk about both, because we have been talking about how women in general, this is a real struggle for women. And I thought it was also interesting that in the same week, Lewis Hamilton came out with a very similar. So just for some context, Timothy Chalamet came out and he did this speech where he's like, I'm trying to be the best. Like, this is my goal. I'm not trying to be average. I'm trying to be the best of the best. These are the people that inspire me. And like, this is one step. Like, this is a bit of fuel in his acceptance speech. This is a bit of fuel to like get me there. Right. It was a bowl, where most people are like thanking their mothers, their wives, whatever. He was like, no, I'm here for, like, I'm ambitious and I'm here. And this week, Lewis Hamilton came out and he was like, don't compare me to other people. Like, I am the first Black Formula One driver. I don't have a wife. I don't have kids. I'm in this. I do everything I do is to live and breathe winning, and I am the best of the best, and don't compare me to anyone else. And for a long time, like I would say, obviously it's particularly with males culturally, like we have been, like there's been a movement against that, but I would say I'm less interested in sort of the gendering of it and more interested in something that you and I were talking about, where I think so many women in my life kind of talk about themselves and then they'll be like, oh, but that sucked about it. This sucked about the thing I did. And they're like able to nitpick the hell out of everything they do, instead of having sort of like, but these women are ambitious. And like, I think that I can see from the outside that they need to be doing that. So I think it's an interesting cultural time. I think it'll be an interesting thing to see.
For sure. For sure. I think it's really important. And yeah, I think can't talk enough about this. And I see it more actually generationally. I wonder if that's it versus gender. Because I do think talking about, and I think Aaron Gallagher does a good job of this, talking about what you want and asking for it and talking about what you've accomplished and sharing it. Generally, men do a much better version of this than women do. And I think that's got to be part of what's ultimately gonna really create long-term change, is women being comfortable doing that, sharing what they want, sharing what they've done, seeing success. So I do hope this is something where doing it in the right way, which I think Timothy did, but there's nothing wrong with sharing what your ambition is and doing it in a respectful and an inspired way. And so maybe it's kind of a generational thing that we'll start to see with men and women. I hope.
Yeah, hopefully. To bring it back to what we were writing about, so that there's context for this conversation.
Right.
Timothy had that award, and then afterwards Cartier threw him a poker party. And I was kind of interested in it because like the pictures were quite grungy. It was obviously like Tobey Maguire was there. Tobey Maguire is kind of famous for like being in the gambling circuits. Like it's like, just a brand being of that caliber, being willing to associate themselves with sort of debauchery or what, like having a good time, quite honestly. Like, I'm not here to like judge anyone for playing poker, like play as much poker as you want. But it was more that the pictures and the whole vibe was not Cartier, like traditional Cartier. But one thing that's been interesting about him is he's been bringing back the tiny watches, and even at the Oscars this weekend, he had a bunch of them on his wrist. Obviously he's working with them, but he's trying to bring sort of a fashion, a more fashionable vibe and like edgier vibe to this like really pretty traditional brand, and I think that's interesting.
Totally. Yeah, agreed. Okay, moving on. Silvers, alphas, and Zs. I mean, I feel like I can't talk about it enough, but the Starburst bubble and just the alpha space and skincare, I feel like that's just blowing up.
Yeah. I mean, I've talked about it in several newsletters, one pretty recently that I think I did the service of linking to in this letter, so that if you need to go back and see all the brands that have entered this space in the last few weeks, they were all in a recent post that I did. But essentially the alpha space, the alpha skincare and wellness space has been blowing up for over a year. I mean, everyone was losing their minds about Sephora and like all the kids hanging out there, and it's just getting more and more crowded. This week, Starface, who are the famous like patch things that all the tweens and also Gen Z too love, they came out with a line of skincare. And I would say that the patches were skincare to begin with. So it's like not even like, oh, they're coming out with a line of skincare. It's like, well, I think they had skincare. It's just an extension of their brand. But they came out with, face washes and a cream. And to me, like the aesthetic is exactly what we talked about when we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. It's like it's exactly the same bubble type piece, the like same vibe, but they do it really well. The photography, the whole campaign is really, really fun, and I think it's going to blow a lot of people out of the water, and especially Bubble, who's kind of the biggest player, I'm sure is kind of worried about this, I would say. But it'll be interesting to kind of see if this bigger player coming into the space halts the kind of rise of like 7,000 like small players coming in, because how are they going to compete with this established brand that does it so well already? Like this brand already knows how to talk to this consumer. It's got every single collaboration down Like it doesn't, they're not learning, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I mean, hopefully.
oh, and then this one is interesting. Like this is a YouTuber. Well, actually, I think he's I wouldn't say YouTuber. He's like a streamer who came out with a line of skincare and deodorant for men, but it's like, I would say it's probably quite like going after like a slightly older alpha boy, but like more edgy and more like it's interesting, and apparently it's already sold out, but like that, we can engineer sold out with like just making one product. So that's not very impressive.
I mean,
but I like the tone of it is quite different, I guess, and that I appreciate.
Yeah, I was thinking about this space, and it's just interesting kind of where it's going to go to. I think it's not kind of as we think about it in traditional spaces. It's obviously growing, it's obviously blowing up, but it's going to be interesting because thinking about my daughter and how aware she is, so much more aware. She's 10 and she's so aware of makeup and skincare. And, I try to emphasize the things that are positive about it, more on the pushing on the self-care versus the you need to look different than you do. But wondering where else, like what are the other extensions that are going to come out of this? How big can it really get? Because this is such a, they're so aware and so interested in this space at such a young age. Just really interested to see, but I think it's not going to behave kind of per norm.
No, not at all. And like we talked about, I think when we talked about this last time is, I think Sailor she doesn't have a phone. But she's not probably, though she does have a phone, but like she's not as involved in the phone as like maybe someone 2 years older than her is. But like my best friend's teens, like they're very similar age, and like they're searching exclusively through AI. Like they're finding all of this product through AI. They're not like, they're either finding it in person because a friend has it, or they're asking for particular things. So I think these will be the players who you will see. If you're looking to like watch this space very actively, I think it will be alpha brands who have to figure it out sooner than maybe some other brands, because they're basically all AI natives. So yes. I think this is a space to watch if you're interested to kind of see how things actually transpire in real time. This will be the space that I would be watching.
For sure. And I think specifically kind of the skincare market, both for girls and for boys, for men and for women, because again, the awareness is there, the interest is there. And even Hudson would love that brand. My son would love that brand. And he's interested in, the YouTuber's chocolate brand or this and the deodorant that he has. So I think it's a really good point that like for everybody, this is going to be the space to watch of what next gen, what alpha is really going to be doing.
Right.
And
doesn't
the way
matter.
that they're going to be consuming.
Exactly. Yep. Like whether or not you're in wellness or not, this is where I'd be watching.
Okay, retail. There's lots to chat about. But I think that, so much to unpack here. But I think really the sports racing, like that feels like a kind of consistent theme coming through. And like where is that? And then where do we really see that going?
Yeah. I mean, so what Kirsten is referring to is that I was noticing like over this last week, like the dial for sportswear brands, like in particular in this section, it's been turned up. Like last year, I feel like people were pretty quiet, like in the marketing space. There wasn't a lot of like new stores being opened as well. There were, but like it didn't feel like people were doing as much. And then it feels like we turned the corner to 2025 and every single brand is like coming for it. So Lululemon in particular has been doing so much in the last like month. Is like, I don't know, they must have a new team. They had the Joan thing that we talked about last week. This week they announced that Lewis Hamilton is like, this line with Lewis Hamilton. And obviously they're trying to come for a more sportswear oriented consumer, not just. I have a pop-up window in front of me right now, but like we can close the poor performing marketing sites window with that. Close the pop-up thing.
That's weird.
There we go. So Lululemon also opened a huge, huge store in London on Regent Street. Absolutely massive. They also opened a glow up, what they're calling the glow up studio in New York City, where there will be like an opportunity to train, like, do dance classes, all of those kinds of things. Like they are really like, it's like they just are coming for this year. And it feels quite different to the Lulu, I would say, of like the last few years, which or even their nascent like beginning, where they had always kind of had menswear, but it always felt like the menswear was much more going after kind of the after sport crowd than the like, or the runner. And this feels like, no, they're coming for real like strength training. They're doing like, it's just much more aggressive, you know? Nike's been doing a ton of stuff. They did a Cortez style like trade-in thing for one of their new shoes, where they had consumers come and like kind of barter like their like prized possessions to like get these new shoes. They're like, what are you bringing me? And it's like, oh, I'm bringing you like a vintage Nintendo, you know, like, or like I'm bringing you like, you know, my grandmother's like wristwatch or whatever. Like they're bringing like things to trade in, which was fun. Who else did I have in there? There were so many brands.
We had Adidas Soccer that we talked about last week. On Allbirds is starting something new. Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting. And I think it's, you know, I think we used to put kind of athleisure in this particular box and say that's just a part of retail. But I think, you know, thinking about Abercrombie, it's basically becoming all of that now, right? Aloe's now opening up a store. They've got a Lululemon. It's like all of the things. And I think it's almost feels like that category is going into where lifestyle retail brands used to be. Like they're really creating a lifestyle and not just saying like, we're just this portion of it, but really they're all the things.
Yeah. I mean, we should also talk about that Lulu and the Allbirds commercial like campaign. It's a like a series, and it's just deeply confusing. They're alive, so like that's news to me, because I feel like from my perspective, Allbirds has been asleep at the wheel and, you know, on a spiral towards something not so great. But they came out with this series that's hosted by Stanley Tucci, and they have Carlos, I never know how to say his last name, Sainz. He's a Formula One racer. If you spend any time in the comment section here, you'll see that he is one of the main draws. But they have all these really interesting guests, and like they call it Table Talk with Stanley Tucci. It is deeply confusing to me, but I'm glad to see that they are trying something.
Deeply confusing. Why Allbirds has anything to do with this?
Yeah. Like, you don't see the shoes, the point of it, like, why Stanley Tucci? I mean, like, obviously, why not Stanley Tucci would probably be the answer, because Stanley Tucci is, like, beloved.
There's the shoes.
But it's, you know, like, it just doesn't, like, is this where people were excited to see that they were alive again. So I'll tell you that. And they were definitely excited about Carlos being on it. So, you know, I think that works. I just don't know if this is what brings this brand back to life. You know, like I don't know if this is telling me where they're going to go, why I would buy these shoes again, which I think is some work that they actually need to do. But maybe this is part of a bigger plan. So I'm not going to write them off yet, but it does feel confused.
Right. I mean, strategy. Would be super curious. Talk about Abercrombie, their store closed. But I'd be curious what viewers think. Like, where's Allbirds going? What's happening? Is this part of a larger strategy? Like, super curious to find out and hear from people.
Yeah. Tell us what you think in the comment section on YouTube, or, you know, or so on Substack if you're there and want to drop in some thoughts there.
Digging into tech. Business prompts. I mean, obviously, I can't talk enough about all of this functional health and superpower and all the things. So it's always where I'm going to lean towards. But I thought this was fascinating.
Yeah. So this particular thing, so Rex Woodbury, who I talk about all the time, wrote this really interesting post about essentially the unbundling of ChatGPT through the prompts. Like, if you spend any time on TikTok, you can see already that there are a number of prompts that people love to post about. Like, I see a lot of moms posting about, which tells you a lot about my algorithm, probably. I see a lot of moms posting about like, hey, I asked ChatGPT to make me a meal plan so that I don't ever have to ask the question, what's for dinner? And I teach like, you know, and I taught it like all the things that my kids like and da-da-da-da-da. One of his examples that's really like another popular prompt on TikTok is people saying, hey, I got my blood work done, and I asked ChatGPT to look at my blood work and give me a functional medicine analysis and a holistic analysis, and maybe sometimes a more standard analysis, and tell me like what the differences are or what I should be doing in order to start feeling better. And, you know, to be quite honest, like I know so many people who are using ChatGPT now for therapy. It's kind of wild. So there's just a lot of prompts that are out there already that people are using. And essentially Rex was saying, hey, if you look at each of these popular prompts, you actually see a business opportunity to kind of say like, hey, like we're going to be the experts at this style of popular prompt, right? Like, because if you start getting into functional medicine, like, yeah, it might be nice that ChatGPT is your starting place, but then it would be nice to have a deeper and deeper expertise and maybe some like checks and balances of somebody actually looking at this. You know, there's an interesting, I didn't write about it, but there's an AI thing that schools are using, which, you know, it's kind of controversial, kind of interesting, where they're saying for after hours when you don't have a school counselor to go to talk to, we have this bot that, you know, that you can talk to. And the bot is monitored for like by actual doctors, like every hour to like check things. But they've actually seen that like rates of attendance have gone up, rates of passing tests have gone up, because kids, like one of the big things that they were finding is actually tests are like a super stressful time and kids start to spiral and then they get in fights with their friends, and like it's all kind of like related to these very basic things that they actually hadn't picked up on from years and years of therapy, because nobody was actually looking for the pattern. And so it's interesting, like what is kind of happening. And like, you know, it's definitely controversial, but I think that there's also not controversial things. And I think the reality is it's coming for us. And so if you're in the space of like being in business, or also thinking about extensions to your brand and like how you might kind of tackle this sort of AI future, I think this is a really interesting space to be thinking.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I mean, I think like anything, it's going to get more and more specialized, because for me, just going to ChatGPT to ask like, you know, my functional fitness or wellness or kind of a meal plan to me, like I need a little bit more credibility. But if there was a ChatGPT that was like, oh, it's backed by, you know, this person and this person and this person, it's like, okay, well, now you got me thinking.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's very close in our future, if not already being developed. But there's hundreds. Just spend any time on TikTok and you'll see these prompts. Use that. Start there.
Yes. Moving into sport, picking up a conversation that we've had before, the bloodstains.
Yeah. So this is talking about a new campaign by, I don't know if Persil is a brand that most people in the US really like are super familiar with, but it's essentially like not Dawn, because Dawn is, yeah, it's a detergent brand. And Persil came out and they partnered with Arsenal women's team, and they did this campaign around the fact that girls drop out of sports because they get period leaks when they're playing. And like then they had all these like really like these women are very famous soccer players in this world, top of their game, talking about like, hey, yeah, like I played on like this very famous pitch and like had a like blood stain on my pants and it's fine, like everything is okay. And I do love the sort of the message. I related it back to a campaign that we talked about a while ago with Megan Rapinoe and with NYX. And she did this thing for, I think it was during the Olympics? I can't remember. But she was essentially, it was essentially saying like, hey, we're going to pay people when they get interviewed, like these world-class athletes, we're going to pay them anytime they talk about their period, just to like normalize talking about it. Like, yeah, I had my period when I did this goal, or I had my period, I wasn't feeling great, but I did this thing. And then they would pay cash for them talking about it. And I liked this campaign a little bit more, a little bit more not traditional, a little bit more provocative. And I think that the Arsenal one was nice, but it felt like it could have been pushed just a little bit bolder, a little bit harder, but still love the message.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, it's an important message. And I had no idea about that was real, that was a problem, an issue before the NYX campaign came out. So that's shocking and obviously a conversation that needs to be had. I will say I did like Arsenal, that they talked about like blood is blood, like, and take out the shame kind of a thing. And it was just a really kind of direct message versus kind of scouting around it, just really kind of very, very direct, which I did really like and hit for me.
Yeah. And I think that's where you go to like when the strategy needs to strategy more, because that is a really bold message and it just needed to be said a little bit louder. Like, I don't know, like there could have been like, I go back to like, also bring in male athletes and have them like, it's like blood is blood. Like, like what are the ways that we can make this much louder, much broader, make it a bigger conversation? I think when you're going to have a really topical campaign like this, like I'm not sure that going quiet and kind of like hoping that people like get the message is really like what you want.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I was looking at Knix and kind of where they've evolved to and what they're up to. And they're talking about wired bras now. I think likewise, like many people aren't talking about this campaign, such an opportunity to really, for a brand, really to get behind a message and think about it really long term. Like these are campaigns that should be out there in the ether. There should be versions of them. There should be UGC around them. We should be talking about them and iterating around them much, much more. Much like, again, you brought up earlier in the conversation, the Bobby Swell. It could be kind of versions off of that where there is this common challenge, right, that we're now aware of. And how do you kind of create brands, create a campaign, create ongoing representation and communication for a brand in that space, so it's not just like a one and done campaign. I agree with you. I think it's about the strategy and making it happen. But there's opportunity.
Totally.
Okay. Wellness and beauty, body odor. What is happening with the full body deodorants? Like I can't tell you, my house between the perfume that Sailor's spraying and the full body deodorant that Hudson is literally putting on his entire body, it's a situation.
Yeah. So full body deodorant is here. So if you're not aware of that trend, we have arrived. But what I thought was, so the two examples that I gave in here were Dove, and Lynx. And Dove's like, I mean, there's so much to unpack in this Dove one because it's also like a pivot of the brand in a very, very confusing way. And I had asked, like I showed something maybe 6 months ago that I was like, what's this? Is Dove going in a new direction?
Yeah.
Yes, my friends, Dove is going in a new direction. So this is their campaign for their body deodorant. And it's set to a song that basically talks about ass cracks and pussy. So just so you know, they basically they blank out those words, but they're relying on the fact that the song is famous enough that you fill them in mentally.
Which you do. You 100% do.
Yes. So, and now we're on to the next Dove campaign, but yeah, I mean, where to begin with like what that is. And then this Lynx one, so literally like I was writing this thing and then I come across this Lynx ad, which they've been putting these ads out for a while, but like, it was like him smelling someone's armpit. And then then it's like they're playing basketball and he's literally smelling his crotch. I was like, what is happening, guys? And everyone is actually quite excited about the Lynx one. And I will say for the Lynx, it feels like actually a return to like a more provocative, fun, weird brand. And that feels right for Lynx. Like I'm not like, it's not like, the thought of smelling someone's crotch like, that literally makes me want to like gag. But like it works for them. Like I think that style of campaign works for them and it's provocative and interesting and whatever. I just don't like the idea of encouraging people to spray anything on their crotch. But for Dove, much more confusing. Like I'm happy that they're trying to come out of this like, like kumbaya, like, everybody cries at the commercial kind of era, because I think it was over and it was iconic for a while and then it kind of lost its, like they did it and they did it and they did it and they beat the drum and then the drum stopped playing well. But I'm not sure that they've taken us on this journey like of where we're going. Like, where are we going? Who is this for? I couldn't tell you. Like, I'm lost.
Yeah. And I think that's to be determined. But again, I think it's about strategy and longevity of it. Like, are they doing this in all of their parts and pieces? And this is the new brand for Dove. And you're going to look on social and it's going to be aligned. And the next commercial spot is going to be aligned and all of the parts and pieces. That I would be super curious about. And that's what I think it would take to do it. But I agree. They're ready for a new vibe, a new kind of image, a new positioning. But are you taking it from kind of the previous positioning and are you just, kind of extending it, making it into something that's completely new and fresh, completely different? And then is there a longer term strategy around that versus just a one and done campaign? And I hope that's not the answer.
Yeah, 100%. I think my view on rebrands like that is like, you either have to like kind of tell us that you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater and make a bigger deal of that, or you need to take us on the journey, like, and tell us where we're going. Because like right now I'm just tuning in and I'm like, oh, I don't know. Like, I don't know if I'm like here for this. Like, this is so confusing. They have been, I've written about collaborations that they were doing on like, like I think it was either with Crumble or the other one, Cookies.
Mm-hmm.
Like they are trying different things and I respect that. So we'll see where they're going. But yeah, I was quite shocked.
Yeah. But I'm here for it. Jury's out. Would love to know what everybody else thinks. So
yeah. And I will, again, I always say, I always respect people who are trying and playing. So it's like, if they're trying, I just think there's a few things that they could do to kind of take us on that journey.
Yeah. To be clear, take us on the journey and tell us about it, but don't tell us that you guys are doing a rebrand or repositioning because no one cares about that. Show us.
Yes. No, show us, but like make a bigger splash so that we like, it's like, I don't know.
We're not questioning it. It's super clear.
Exactly.
Okay. I'm kind of obsessed moving on to travel and I'm kind of obsessed, no shock, with these pajamas.
Well, I knew you would be. And sometimes I tell you, I just put things in there mainly because I know that you're going to like them.
I think we're going to have to go to Japan to get these pajamas.
Yes. There's very little that could make me like Lufthansa. So this is real feat on their behalf. Yeah, just love the pajamas. And I think it's a part of a bigger trend. Like we've seen like, I've written about, they had, was it In-N-Out Burger who they had? No, Shake Shack. They had like a first class thing. And I saw recently Magnolia Bakery did something with a first class group. And so I think it's interesting to see brands, airline brands in particular, trying to play with this. They're obviously doing it in first class because it's smaller SKUs, like more like, a higher paying customer. They can't like do this for every single person. Like there's literally like 2 of these like on every plane. So it's like doable. But I think it's an interesting time. They're obviously talking to kind of a more design savvy consumer and like that people are going on these first class trips for leisure and pleasure and not just business class like tickets. So that's interesting.
100%. Okay, well, we're running out of time because I do have to jump for a call. But the fun for the week that I wanted to hit on was Diptyque is clearly like they're doing something. They're pushing. They got a new team. They got a new strategy. They got a new CEO. Something is going on, and I'm love to see it. Parker Posey for Gap. Everybody has to see that. Like I just can't. All right, so this is the Diptyque.
Yeah. So yeah, Diptyque opened a New York club. It's actually like around one of their fragrances that they have, their signature fragrances. And then this jazz club is actually going to travel to a variety of different locations. I think it's going to London, somewhere in Asia. So yeah, they're really trying things. And like we talked about their foundation last year and it was last week and it was interesting to just see them trying things and being braver. So that's great.
Totally. And then this Gap commercial, I think, is everything.
I love all the content Gap has been making. And they have had a viral pant lately, but I will say I still contend that you are not seeing this come through in stores. And I really, 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 really want to make sure that they actually do that.
Yeah.
Because this is Parker Posey is obviously on White Lotus, but I like that they don't try to reference that. She's amazing. She's also the best person, like dress person on the show. Like her style credibility is up right now. Like it's all the things, and just the style of the shoot is great too. But like, my God, I really want a good retail experience.
Yeah,
and good product.
They've got it's gotta happen, or you can do all the advertising you want in the world, but if you get there and the store isn't connected, it's not going to last. It's always about brand and product. But I do think one of the reasons this Gap commercial resonates so much is it goes back to kind of the fundamentals of when Gap has been iconic. This is what it's about. It's about, to your point, like not mentioning the star, but really pulling out the right person, the right timing, her age, her demographic, everything about her. And then her actual, like the choreography and her in this commercial is exactly who we know Parker Posey to be. Kind of awkward, kind of weird, and kind of cool. Like exactly perfect within that. So I do feel like I've seen some of the other stuff. I agree with you has been great, but it hasn't been as iconic as I think this particular spot.
It's excellent. Claps.
And then, yeah. And then the last one is, I was like, Tory Burch, the Substack that everybody's copying. What's happening here? And Tory Burch, like, again, haven't heard a lot recently. So cool to kind of really see it happening here.
Yeah, she got 2 mentions in this letter because they're actually making some pretty good content in the Instagram premium category, I would say. But yeah, they've really leaned into their Substack. And I think one of the big conversations is like, creating a Substack for a brand is not like no social channel, quite honestly, these days is no effort. But it's really like it's high quality editorial content. I've told you that brands were going to hire writers in my predictions. Here you go. So yes, brands are coming to Substack in a big way, but they are also coming with a team to help them do it.
All right. So we got time for. But would love to know comments, thoughts. Be sure to give some love on the algorithm.
Yeah. And subscribe and more next week, every week. Tune in.
Yeah. And ideally on YouTube if you want the visual version, which with all of the uploads and visuals that we actually talk about. Otherwise, Apple, Spotify, all the regular places, and of course, Substack.
Yeah.
All right. See you next time.
Ciao.